Good morning. Welcome to College Coffee Talk. We are co-located today. Pearl and Andy Lockwood from Lockwood College Prep. Good morning, Pearl.
Good morning, Andy. Good morning, everyone out there.
Lots to talk about today. This is the show where we talk about getting into college, paying for college, should you even bother going to college, what's the whole point, SAT prep, ACT prep, you name it. So here we are, a couple of days after Ivy Day. That's certainly a big deal for a lot of our clients. We're just to timestamp this. This is March 31st, right?
Yes.
We're also on the heels of the Final Four being locked and loaded after this past weekend. So that's coming up. Pearl, do you have any picks for next weekend in terms of who do you think will be crowned the national champion?
Well, I heard some murmurings for no other reason except I heard some murmurings about Duke could take it all.
Where did you hear these murmurings?
Maybe from one of our children.
Yeah, well,
deeply invested and interested in this thing.
Well, Duke certainly has the lowest acceptance rate, and it also is the most expensive. And it's also the most generous in terms of need-based financial aid. So those are three reasons they could win.
Right. So from a financial aid bracketology standpoint,
and admissions, yeah,
an admissions standpoint,
yeah,
it's going to go deep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus Cooper Flag and whatever. Also, an interesting stat that you pointed out: this will be a very Jewish Final Four. 3 of the 4 coaches are of the
75%.
Yeah, members of the tribe.
Say
right. You got Bruce Pearl, who's the Auburn guy, and John Shire's the Duke guy. I think he's half Jewish, and then
we'll take him.
Yeah. Who else? I can't remember who the third one is. But that was your stat you came up with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I know that's pleasing to a lot of people. I'm sure that's why they tune in to watch this and listen to this on our podcast.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about before we get into some Ivy admissions results. Last week we talked about how it's not so important to get into an Ivy League school. It doesn't really matter where you go, etc. That being said, it's still great to get into an Ivy League school. If that's what you're gunning for, and hopefully you get in, then hopefully you get there and you get a lot out of it, which are all separate things. They don't necessarily follow one from the other, but that's what we hope happens with our clients. We've had, I guess this cycle was pretty much like every cycle that I can remember. We've had numerous kids get into Ivy League schools. We had a handful get into Cornell. I don't know if we had anyone get into Duke, which is technically not an Ivy League school.
Right.
We just had one of our top performers get into Wharton at Penn. So it's very interesting. And I think what is worth talking about is, what do they do? What do they have in common? What does it take,
right,
to get in, and who doesn't get in? I think that's equally important, because I think
and where the confusion lies sometimes.
Yeah, someone was asking me the other day. I think we were socializing. Oh, Pearl, are you holding up? Did we not do the song?
I know you don't have a drink, but
the synchronized
part of our shtick before we get into it. But you started to get into it, and I know maybe some of you wait with bated breath to
see this.
Take your morning sip.
You see this?
I see that.
All right, so let's
floated from my kitchen to Duncan.
Okay. Well, let's have a synchronized sip of our morning beverage. 1, 2, 3. God, I feel like we're all over the place. We should start over today.
Bring it in.
Okay, so let me just talk about a couple of people who didn't get in to those, not just Ivy, but Ivy adjacent schools. So every year, including this year, I have conversations along the lines of the one I had the other day, which was, do you think this is a harder year than ever?
Always. Every year we get that.
Yeah. And, on one hand, statistically speaking, more college graduates than ever, 3.9 million for the class of 2025. More colleges are taking the Common Application than ever. And we're slightly below the peak, but many colleges are still test optional, which encourages many kids just to throw in an application on a lark, on a wing and a prayer, which I think contributes to the super low admissions and acceptance rates. So one of the people that jumps out at me this year was a mom who was very uptight. I'd say more upset, not necessarily uptight, but a little bit of both, about her daughter's admissions results as they were coming in real time. She would send a bunch of emails to me and to her advisor that she was working with about, oh, she didn't get in here, she got waitlisted, she's so depressed, she can't get out of bed. Do you think she did something wrong? Did we mess up on the essay? Everyone always tries to second guess what it was that kept them out of the acceptance pool, which I totally understand. But when we were, kind of looking over her file and trying to analyze things, one of the reasons she did not get into her top choice school, which is not test optional, might have had less to do with her essay and more to do with the fact that she had a 1390 on her SAT in a school where the median is about a 1520. Right? Maybe she overlooked that. We overlooked things like that.
Yeah.
Right. She thought she did something wrong. She thought she did, she came up short somehow because of some mistake. And what I reassured her before we even got into these reasons was, look, she's going to be a successful kid and adult no matter where she goes to college, because she sees herself as belonging in that echelon of highly competitive kids, and she's a hard worker, and she's very good interpersonally. She's got high emotional intelligence. She's able to look people in the eye and shake their hands and all that. Those are far more important than the rear window sticker on the car that mom and dad drive around. So interestingly, I think people forget how they don't know, or they learn, but they forget how they stack up compared to the true competition, right? So you've got Naviance, at most high schools, or SCORE, or something that they use to handicap your odds of admission. But those two different softwares, Naviance and SCORE, they look at you versus other kids from your high school, but you're competing with kids all over the country, if not beyond. And they just look at your grades and your scores, and that's it. They don't look at race, ethnicity, other non-politically correct things, your rigor of coursework, right? So that was the case for her. And I gently had to point out, I think the main reason was probably that, she was competing with kids who had 1520s and 1530s as a median. So the mom was like, oh yeah, right. P.S.
And in that case, was the rest of her application overcoming that lack of a score?
It was very middle of the road to lower end of the, in my opinion, lower end of the range. Not out of the running, but not a slam dunk to get in. She took a shot, which was great.
Right.
The denouement, here's what happened, is that she got into USC, not US of C, not South Carolina, but she got into USC, right, which was terrific. I mean, she was psyched. So I kept reassuring the mom before that happened, don't worry, you're not going to remember this, a few months later, right. It's just be a blip on your radar and your memories, if you even remember it at all. Right. So now she's psyched and she forgot about everything else. So that's pretty cool. Had another client who was deferred initially, then she was rejected by Boston College. And I may have talked about this previously. And she said, do you think there's something wrong with my application? Did I mess up the essays? And this is a kid who worked very, very hard on her applications and essays. But actually, both students in this example did. And I said, well, I have to check our software, which we use to handicap, all of the factors that get in and your chances of acceptance. And when I did that the next day, yeah, she had, according to our software, about a 2% chance of getting into to Boston College because her GPA was slightly lower than the median, her rigor was slightly lower than the median, her test scores were slightly more than slightly lower than the median at Boston College, and her extracurriculars were good, but they weren't like blow you away, knock your socks off, which it can take to get into highly selective colleges. So again, she was, even though she and I worked on the software together constantly, she just didn't focus on the fact that her true odds of acceptance right there in not black and white, in color red indicated that she had a really, really long shot of getting in. So she didn't do anything wrong. She just wasn't that echelon, right? And she has plenty of other great choices, which is terrific.
Yeah.
Right? So let's talk about one of our all-stars this year. So sometimes people ask me, like, the questions about like how good of a college advisor are you, or those types of things. How do we measure whether you're good or not? And I'll say something like, well, we do have a secret, and this is a secret that that we use for every one of our kids who gets into Ivy or other highly selective colleges. Should I say the secret? Do you know the secret?
Probably.
Okay. I'm going to share it here.
I'll never tell. Okay.
Well, just between me, you, and Zuck, and our podcast, and our Instagram, and our and our TikTok. The secret is we work with a lot of really smart kids who are hardworking, right? And then we do whatever we can to help them add that 10% or 15%, polish to give them a better chance of acceptance. But we can't. What's the right word? We can't, put lipstick on a pig or something. So
it's like starting with really good ingredients if you're going to make a Caesar salad.
Back with the food analogies.
Always.
Yeah. Usually it's like a cake. You come up with like a dessert.
I was thinking cake, but
yeah, that was a nice one.
Thanks.
Nice call. So let me tell you about. I'm going to try to get him on a different episode so we can interview him. But this guy who got into Wharton and Dyson, the main business school at Cornell, and Michigan Ross, and a bunch of other great schools. He was initially deferred, and I won't say I was shocked, but he was crestfallen. He was initially deferred at Wharton, but we worked with him probably from sophomore year forward. I spent most of that time, the 2.5 years, saying to him, if Wharton doesn't let you in, I don't know who they let in. I mean, he was that type of kid. So then when he got deferred, that was kind of crushing. But we kept the faith, and that didn't mean anything, and he got in last week. But so let me describe him a little bit, just so people know who gets in to these types of schools. And this is, I won't get too personal because I don't want to reveal, I didn't get his permission. But it's very similar to our other kids who got into, we had a couple kids get into the Cornell business schools. One was Dyson, one was, I think we had 2 in the hotel school, maybe a couple more in arts and sciences, I'm not sure. So number one, he was very involved with one of the clubs in his school, but he was so involved with his school, not just president, but he was president of the whole state of where he's not a New Yorker, the whole state of where he lives. He was president of the state. That's insane, right? Right away. Number 2, he had his own, sort of part-time business, which did more than $1 million. Okay. So those are my 2 recommendations to kids.
Pretty special. Right.
Those are my 2 recommendations. You have to hire me for this one. Number 1, be the state president of a club. Number 2, start your own business that does more than $1 million. Number 3, super active with, maybe not as active as his application suggested, but super active with community service type charity things, religious type things. Okay. Number 4, the least entitled, hardest working kid, certainly top 1% of all the kids that we worked with this year. And most of the kids we work with are pretty hard workers, but he was at another level. He drove here for our boot camp sessions from out of state at least 4 times this summer, just because he felt that was going to be worth it to him. Yeah, he could have logged in by Zoom. He was like, no, I think I'm going to get more out of this face-to-face. So he hustled, right? And this is not someone, by the way, who's an underrepresented minority. He's the opposite. If anything, his ethnicity counted against him. Certainly wasn't favored, right? I'm probably forgetting some of the other things, but he worked so hard and diligently on his essays. We easily went through 15 drafts between his writing, my reviewing, and working with Joe, our editor. By the way, in the beginning, I don't think I told the client this. Joe, after he worked with him for one session, he was like, I can't work with this kid. I'm like, what? Because he's never said that to me before, right? And Joe's a very patient guy. He used to, he's a Brown University grad. He's a professional editor. He's an English teacher, as an adjunct professor, right? And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I just can't. He's not letting me draw anything out of him because he's so rigid and all that. So I explained that to the kid, and he's like, okay, I see. So there was a lot of back and forth on and hard work on his essays. He's a good writer, but it was really more about what are we trying to get across that's going to resonate with the admissions officers. So that's the type of kid who gets into an Ivy League school. He had at least 2, if not 3, sort of world-class or close to world-class types of accomplishments in his resume. And his main essay was not about the business stuff at all. Wow. It was about the stuff that Joe helped him draw out, about his commitment to his community and his religious stuff and things like that.
I want to point out what you have not spent the last 10 or so minutes in describing this student is that he had near perfect or perfect scores and grades and took the most rigor offered at his high school and whatever. But because in part, and realize again, those things are kind of given if you're going to compete at that level. Andy didn't even mention it yet. He just talked about all the other things that separate. So when because I sometimes have the student who doesn't get into the Ivy League who said, but I have the grades and I do have the scores. But it's this piece that separates the wheat from the chaff, essentially. And what was it about the kid who's accepted, the student who's accepted to the Ivy League and who's not?
Yeah, I would even, if memory serves, I would even argue that his SAT scores, actually, they weren't top of the heap. They were strong, but I actually said that's the only, other than stuff that's out of your control, like race and ethnicity and whatever, if you don't get in, even though I said to him over and over again, like I'm superstitious about this, but I was like, I don't know who else they take if it's not you. And I've had this before, another Wharton guy, I remember Kevin who got into Stanford and like every Ivy he applied to, and or Alex who got to Harvard. And I was like, yeah, if they don't take you, I don't know who they take, right? So we get kids like that. It doesn't mean they get in, but when when we know, we know. Yep. But I remember encouraging this young man, you know what? I know you have a good score, but I would prefer another 20 to 30 points just to lock it in, because he was in the low 15s.
Right.
And he was like, really? I'm like, look, I don't want that to be the one thing.
Right.
And so he's like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And he did not improve his score, mostly because the kid's so freaking busy, with all of his activities and crazy stuff.
But this may be an example of what you frequently will push against. If somebody wants to compete at that level, and you'll say, but that's what all the kids have. And if you have a weakness in a certain area, then if you're competing at that level, the rest of your application has to be that much stronger. In this instance, it was that much stronger.
Yeah. And I would even, right. So in his case, it wasn't a weakness per se,
No,
because
it
he was right in
certainly
the
wasn't.
range, but it wasn't a strength.
Right.
And my feeling is I want to make every application as near perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect application, but I want to try to help every application be as perfect as it can be for the schools he's applying to. And that was kind of an issue because we went back and forth, me and him, me and his dad, back and forth. Should I really need to take it again? I'm like, you don't need to, but that could be the weak link, right? That could be the chink in the armor. But he, I mean getting into a top college, not just an Ivy, but a Boston college or most of the competitive schools, meaning colleges that admit 50% or less. That's about 60% academic, meaning GPA, rigor, which gets overlooked all the time, and test scores. And then the other 40% is a combination of things that are out of your control, like race, ethnicity, your zip code, stuff like that, and things that are in your control, like your extracurriculars, your essays, your activities section, and how that's written up also, and your recommendations and things like that are partially in your control. So I'll just say one more thing about rigor. I don't know if I had this conversation. I think I did actually with him when he was an 11th grader, but I had this conversation all the time. I was talking to somebody else recently who over the weekend on Saturday, who was asking, should I drop? Is it okay if I drop, X? And I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, I hate, I'm bad at language. I hate Latin. Do I really need it to be able to get in? So I'll have that conversation a lot, and I'll also have, I'm in AP Spanish. Do I have to sign up for AP Spanish next year, or do I have to sign up for AP Physics next year? I'm not going to major in either one of those things. So my answer is always, well, number one, what types of colleges do you want to be competitive at? Right. And then depending on the answer, that affects, what my recommendation is. So if someone is gunning for, being competitive at an Ivy or Ivy adjacent, Ivy Plus or Villanova, Boston College, those types of places, what I'll say to them is like, look, you can not take that extra AP even, because it's hard, but you're going to be competing with a lot of kids who did. So why fight with one hand tied behind your back? Instead, give yourself the best shot, or just decide that you don't want to be that competitive at that type of school level, right? That type of stratosphere of school. So that's really what it comes down to. So the kid who wanted to drop language, I said, after she told me what types of colleges she was interested in getting into, I said, okay, well then you don't really need to take that. As long as your colleges have requirements that you only need 2 years of language. Most colleges have a 3-year requirement, but she said that she looked at it, she thought it was 2 years. I'm like, okay, well, we'll have to double check that. Then it's okay to drop. But for most other kids who want to be, have their candidacy taken seriously at top tier schools, they almost always have to end up, taking that extra AP, because if they go to a high school that gives you the ability to take a lot of APs and you choose not to avail yourself of that, it looks like you're taking it easy on yourself. So you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're self-sabotaging.
Yep.
So that's basically how I answer that question, is really, what are your goals first before we decide in a vacuum, whether it's okay to drop something. You ever have people ask you, like, well, she's done course for 3 years, is it okay if she drops, or do colleges need to see that for continuity? You ever hear?
Right. Yes, of course I get that.
Yeah. So what's your answer to that?
Well, I'll point out the fact that it is important to show continuity and consistency. And after 3 years, dropping something that you've been consistent at would raise an eyebrow, I think, of an admissions officer. Like, What happened? Did you have a problem of some sort? Are you lazy? Now you have senioritis. Did you have a problem with the teacher? Is this, something about your attitude? It could tell a story potentially bigger than you
Right.
realize.
The way I look at it is if you want to drop chorus or some sort of activity, not necessarily an academic class, my or a sport or something, like we have a client right now who is at our local high school here. She runs for the same coach that our
Yes.
daughter ran for, who's known for burning kids out.
Yes.
He's also known for sending kids to Division I schools and getting on top scholarships. And she wanted to drop spring cross country. She runs in the fall.
Oh, okay.
And I said to her, that's fine if you are replacing that time slot with something of equal or greater value to what you're dropping. Because colleges in a vacuum, admissions officers in a vacuum like to see continuity, that you've stuck with something. But if it's just torture for yourself, or you're injuring yourself, or it's preventing you from doing other things that are at least equal, if not of greater value to you. Like in her case, she wants to devote time to building out this website to help people volunteer, to get around to high schools and have them promote volunteer opportunities and things like that, which is a pretty massive undertaking, for a high school kid, for anyone, but it's going to require time. She didn't feel like she would have time to do that, and she was kind of burnt out on running. So in that case, I was like, yeah, absolutely drop it, because you're answering the question like, well, what did you do with your time? If you just drop and you're taking a free period or something, then that I don't think that's going to be helpful to you.
Right. Agreed. Depends on the circumstances.
Yeah. But getting back to the rigor thing. So if you're not going to be a STEM major, but you're going to, you're trying to get into a top college, you still need to have AP Calc, at least AB, if not BC. Even if you have no interest in majoring in anything related to math or STEM, but you want to get into an Ivy or a similar type of school, you have to, because everyone who gets in has AP Calc, at least AB. So that's just the way it is. It's not really negotiable. It's if you're striving for that type of college and you don't do that, then you're hurting yourself.
It's kind of like if somebody was casting a play and the specs for the female lead has to be 5'9" or higher. And someone who is 5'7" is just every part of that is so great, but she's 5'7". She's not going to be cast when they are requiring that she be 5'9" or more.
Theater Kid Pearl, ladies and gentlemen.
Jazz hands.
Those jazz hands or Fosse hands? What's the difference?
Fosse. Jazz hands.
Is that like the Robin Williams thing?
Yeah, it is, because he was doing it. This is Fosse. And then when he goes Twyla as in Tharp, Twyla Tharp. It's another dance company.
Okay, no idea.
What do you know?
Not that for sure. I actually feel very badly for the people listening to this on our podcast, because the visual of you.
I know. Someone get the cane. Get it around her neck.
No, it's very, very compelling.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah, so either you have these core elements or you don't, and if you don't have them, you better have something else that is tremendous that offsets that, like being a recruited basketball athlete, to get into Yale. I think a lot of the kids that played for Yale did not have 14 AP classes in high school, but they were smart. They have to have a certain minimum SAT, because they can't just over recruit kids with low scores. There's a balancing, an academic index that they adhere to. But if you're not one of these special categories, like a recruited athlete or an international student or a legacy, which doesn't really count as much anymore, or any of these other categories that get thumbs on the scale from admissions officers, and you're not on par, you're not at the median with either, or not just either, any of the GPA, rigor, and SAT or ACT score median scores, then you are, again, you're not competitive. You're not as competitive as you think you are.
Right.
So I think that has a lot to do with
That's exactly
expectations. I think the understanding how you stack up
Yep.
and your expectations versus, reality, I think has a lot to do with with this whole admissions Armageddon, when when moms are shocked and kids can't get out of bed and all that type of thing.
Yep.
And I'm not making fun of them. I'm not begrudging them. But if you have your eyes wide open and you create a balanced strategic list
Yep.
that measures how you measure up in all the categories that admissions officers look at, then you're going to have much better results in December through March of your senior year.
Well said.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, should we end here?
Sure, we could end here. Very, very quickly, just an update, a small update on the whole what's happening with the Department of Education and the financial aid and student loans and all that good stuff. I can share with you, there's a lot up in the air. Thus far, I am hearing that student loans, obtaining them, submitting FAFSA, financial aid, getting federal funding, being able to borrow the loan forgiveness programs, parts of those may be somewhat vulnerable, but generally speaking, those programs are intended to remain in place. In substance and in form, they may be handled by other departments. The other thing I'll share, because I think this is an update from last week, I had shared that there was no ability to go online and do online work, if you will, on your student or educational loan, parent loan.
What type of work?
For example, if you have been in a standard repayment plan, which is the highest amount one could potentially will pay on the repayment. Okay, that's based on loan balance, 10 years, etc. And that would be your monthly payment. From that point, there are a variety of options, repayment options, that can lower your monthly payment, depending on your goals, depending on what's available, depending on your income.
Mm-hmm. And you couldn't do that last week?
What? So last week, what was not possible, those who were already consolidated into loans or consolidating with the intention of choosing an income-based repayment plan, those income-based repayment plans were not available online, were not available at all. Now they are available online, so you can go ahead and select an income-based repayment plan. Those channels online are evidently available. However, caution, I am also hearing at this point that while that's true, nothing is being processed just yet. So I don't know that I would jump. I'm just sort of trying to wait it out a little bit and see what's actually going to be. So that's my update.
Okay. If anyone has student loans or parent loans and they're looking for help with this type of stuff, consolidation and repayment plan advice and all that is something we do. Just message us here, and we can get you the information of how we might be able to help you.
Yes.
Good. All right, let's wrap up. Thanks for being with us this week on College Coffee Talk, co-located. I think this went well, Pearl. I think I'll see you in person later, or are we going to be separate the rest of the day?
No, we could do this.
All right. Don't commit. Fine. And please share this with anyone you think who could use this information. Please follow us so you never miss out yourself.
Let us know what keeps you up at night, college-wise. What are your questions? What are you worried about? What do you want to hear more about? That's what we do here. So let us know, and we'll try. Your burning questions. Your burning college questions. Keep them college related though. Please. Yeah. Okay. All right. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.